of designs. Now I can click on this right-hand side, click and hold, and drag this down and look at the various designs that I want to go ahead and maybe use one of them. And I'm looking to see what I have. And some of them are duplicated to teach a certain point about the software, which we'll get to later in the series of lessons. This is the Rose Small Head Bright, the Rose Small Head, and the Rose Head. And you can see the density is a little different between these. And that's a teaching thing to go over later in the software in the lesson. And so here's a design. I'm going to left click on this to select it, and it's in selection mode. And if I decided, wait, I don't think I want to use that, I want to use this, let me click on here. Well, then the selection box moves over to here. If I wanted to use both of these, I would have had to use the insert tool and not the open tool. And if I forget what tool did I use open or insert? Well, if I come over here and look, in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, we're in the open dialog. So I'll go ahead and click on 3 flowers to select it, and then I can click here on open, or I could just double-click on 3 flowers to open it. But I'll click on open, and it was open, and look what happened. Embedded into the software is data that tells the software from the design that this design requires the use of the 180 millimeter by 270 millimeter design. That's the size of the design, and it requires this large hoop. And if I look over here on the design panel, the information panel, it's 50,064 stitches. And I don't know if I want to do that. It has 45 color change here if we look at this. If we touch these measurements, it changes the measurement from metric to imperial. This is 6.5 inches wide and a little over 10 inches high. And that's why the hoop size changed. Well, I don't want to use this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to here to open, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to say, I'd like to use a different design, but when we clicked on documents here when we clicked on this, I noticed that my Premiere Plus 2 folder is out here. Let me click on this. Let me scroll down here. Oh, there's a sample folder here. Let me click on samples. Let me go down to Premiere Plus 2 EMB. Let me go down to Stitch 2. And let me scroll down here, say, to flowers. Now, here in flowers, I want to look for a nice flower that I can use in the design. I think this fantasy flower. Let me double click on this to open it up. It too requires a larger hoop. Okay, it's the same hoop, 180 by 270, but it requires that hoop, and I don't want a design that has that many stitches in it right now. So I'm going to go to File and Open, and I'm going to scroll down and see if I can find a design that I like that won't require all those stitches. And I'm wondering if this design might work out for me. Well, it has a smaller design, but it's still using the same hoop. But that's okay because I can click here, and as I look over here, I see it's 59.4 by 91.3. You know what? I'm going to switch this over and turn off Enter Hoop Size, and I'm going to go down to Natural. I'm going to go here to the Designer Epic and click here to see all the hoop, and I see the metric sizes of them. I only need about a 60 by 90. I think I'll use 120 by 120. I'll click on that. I'll click OK, and it's much smaller, and I can see the total number of stitches is only 8,500 stitches, and this is fine for what I want to do. So here's my design, and at this point, if I said, I'm not sure, if this is a stitch file or a project file, a VP4 project file. I'm not sure of that. So what I need to do is come over here to File, and I'll click on File, and now this time I'm going to click on Export. When I click on Export, the Export dialog will open up, and it's the job of the Export dialog to translate this into a stitch file. And here are all the stitch files that we can stitch out. The VP4 stitch file, and this is the VP4 stitch file, and only certain Viking machines can stitch a VP4 stitch file. Here's a Viking VP3 stitch file. If you're in doubt as to if your machine can stitch this out, then use the VP3, unless you specifically know that it will stitch out a VP4. But if you have a baby lock machine, then you need to use a PES. The older baby lock format is a PEC, and so forth, all the way down the line. Here's an SHV for Viking. This is older than a VP3. The VIP is even older than an SHV, and the Hus is the oldest of all. For the most part, the main difference is that the Hus design, for example, rather than saying forest green for the thread color as you're trying to stitch this Hus design out on your Epic 1 or Epic 2, the thread color will only show green. It won't say forest green. You can see here we have 3 different green colors here, and I'm not sure which one is forest green, which one is evergreen, which one is something else green. So you don't want to use Hus if you can use VP3. And worst case, if you had like the Husqvarna Viking Rose, which used the Hus, if you tried to stitch out a VP3, it would simply say, I can't do that. The file format is unrecognized. And then you just have to come back here and say, okay, let me try the Hus, or let me try the VIP format, and so forth. The Janome So, this is the older Janome. The Melco Expanded, this is a commercial machine. The FOF PCS, this is an even older FOF format. The Tajima machine, these are, for the most part, commercial machines, these last 2. So I'm going to make it a VP3, just to be sure. It asks, well, we're going to optimize for sewing. Should I use color sort or optimize stitch length? For the most part, these are the defaults. Just leave them alone. They'll work fine with most of them. The options here we'll go over later in another lesson. There are no decorations in this design. That is, decorations where you would put sequins or beads and such, so that's why there's nothing here. The hoop orientation is what we see here. It's called normal. When we put this in the sewing machine, the way it looks here is the way it's going to look when it stitches out. Flip design for felting or reverse embroidery. Now notice the leaf is on the left side. If I do that, it flips it upside down, so we could do felting or reverse embroidery. I don't need that, so I'll just turn that off. There are no splitting options necessary here because this design fits entirely within this hoop. If I wanted to split the design, this would be enabled. That is, it would appear as black letters, not dark gray letters on the button, and we could click on it. Now, right now, if I click on that, nothing happens. But I'm ready to go. I'm going to click on OK, and it now says, OK, we're going to do a save as, and the save as is going to be a stitch file. You can see here that save as type, it tells us right here. If I click here, it says there's only one file type we can save it as, a VP3 stitch file, not a VP3, a non-existent VP3 project file. So it's going to be a stitch file. Now what I want to do, I'm going to be able to say, well, where do you want to save these designs? I'm going to still, because they're going to go into a special folder where I can put things, I'm going to come over to here, and I'm moving my insertion point, and I'm going to call it Tim's, and we cannot put an apostrophe in there, Tim's flower stalk. And this last part that says underscore stitches, I'll show you in another lesson later how we can make that the default word. If you try this out in your software now without following the modification that I need to tell you about, this will say not stitches, but exported. And I like to use the word stitches so that it's a constant reminder to me that this is a stitch file and not a project file of any kind. So now that I've got that set up, what I need to do is put this in a folder that I would recognize as being something that I did with my SewNet. And I'm going to do that by coming down here and clicking on the data files, my D drive, and I'm going to come down here and I want to create a folder called My SewNet Stitches. So I'm going to come up here